I'm Megan Rennie, and I can't wait for you to hear from Cora Rennie as part of our Understanding People-Pleasing Summit for women to uncover the root causes, embrace self-compassion, and create deep connections that you've been craving. Cora is a recovering people pleaser and identifies as a highly sensitive, deep feeler. Through her training to become a biodynamic craniosacral therapist, Cora gained profound insights into the body's innate wisdom and learned directly in her own body the importance of a felt sense of safety. Cora incorporates the foundations of the cranial modality with her personal gifts and own lifelong healing experiences to support others in their recovery of self processes. She believes there are key components to true, deep, lasting healing that communicate directly to the physiological wiring of our systems, and providing those elements allows for us to cultivate a deep sense of self, resilience, and trust. Her work combines an understanding of natural body responses with deeply attuned presence for those navigating complex emotional landscapes. She's an Alberta girl and proud empty nest mama to myself and my brother Jared. So, before we dive in, can you share with us a little bit about your personal story and how you got to where you are today?
I love this so much. Okay, so thank you, Megan, for being my interviewer for this conversation. I feel like I have been dripping a little pieces of my story into probably every interview. So people who have been listening to all the interviews probably know a little bit about me already. Um, I will say that I did not know until very recently that I was a people pleaser, and it took I really do believe it took feeling safe in my body first, before it provided me some contrast for having an understanding that I actually had been walking this world for a very long time, feeling actually quite unsafe. Um, and and so I guess I'll go a little bit more into it. So I had a very specifically contrasting experience where I had dated a gentleman and ended the relationship, and he ended up being a stalker. And there was a moment where, so after having created boundaries and, blocking that text number and then texting from a different number and blocking that, and then blocking that email, getting an email from another email address and blocking that, and all these blocks. And then a knock at my door. That was him. And I was physically hiding in the closet with my heart pounding and feeling like I was about to vomit, not sure um, to what extent he was going to violate more boundaries potentially. And he did not enter my house. But I did come out of that experience feeling like that was the first time in my entire life I'd felt really unsafe in the world. And that experience happened immediately before I started my craniosacral training in biodynamic craniosacral therapy. Um, so during the training, I so biodynamic craniosacral therapy is quite specific and specifically different from any other kind of body touch therapy that I've experienced. And I will acknowledge, like, I understand a lot of different energy therapies. I've had other light touch therapies, but there's a specific paradigm with the biodynamics that creates for an added level of safety for the client's system. And that really is that there's a complete orientation to the health and wisdom of the body, and being specifically mindful of not interfering with the body, not asking anything of the body, not needing anything from the body, not trying to evoke any kind of specific expression from any of the parts or anatomy of the body. So, and I, not to say that some of these other light touch modalities are specifically invasive, but whenever there's touch and there's an agenda behind the touch, that's completely different from having touch where there's no agenda. And I also believe in different healing modalities where, adjustments are being made to the body. Like, there's a time and place for everything, But for me, in my system, my ability to feel safe and access a sense of safety in my body came through biodynamic touch, where it, yeah, I mean, just to acknowledge as human beings, we all come into relationship with each other having our own stuff. Like we all have, yeah, as they say, our own baggage. We all have experiences that we're running, patterns that we're running that we're maybe not aware of. We all have unmet needs. And so we come into relationship with each other, often not aware of what ways we might be trying to get needs met. Um, and sometimes it's very, sometimes you're very aware that the person touching you is trying to meet some of their own needs. Like you can feel that sometimes. But all of that to say, in biodynamic craniosacral in the training, so part of the training, of course, is as we're learning, we're practicing on each other, but also part of the training is to receive several treatments from other like already certified practitioners, so that our body can incorporate basically what biodynamic craniosacral therapy is on a lot of different levels. And so that was me understanding that I felt safe. And also then understanding the ways, once I had that experience in the cells of my body and that understanding, um, I could see and understand that growing up thinking that I was just really shy, really introverted, just more comfortable being alone than being around other people, I began to see that actually all of that was me not feeling safe with people. Sorry, not feeling safe with people. It was kind of a difficult thing to face. Like it was a difficult thing to realize that as much as I know people in my life have loved me and loved me really hard, that there was something running in my system that had never received that. And um, actually felt unsafe around people. So I was comfortable being alone, but only because I was performing and expressing other than my true self around most people most of the time, even the people closest to me. And so that's where my understanding of people pleasing came in.
How you said, like talking about like, yeah, people acknowledging that there was love there, and it's not that there was anything people were not doing correctly or enough on the outside of you, but for whatever various reasons, you can know about that love on that like the more surface intellectual cognitive levels, but there's some little pocket in there that is just like, yeah, like the geography of your inner self, just like there's this little space that is harder to get that love to access, or like just doesn't click in properly, or like who knows, and just like that happens without anyone necessarily doing anything wrong, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, now that you say that, it actually makes me think of the conversation I had with Dr. Amy. Um, she talked about that developmentally we have different needs, of course, and one of the very first needs as a baby, is the hold me need. And so a baby that doesn't feel held, then that creates all kinds of alarms in their system. And when I think of my own birth story, like I know, like back in the 70s, babies didn't immediately get put on mama's breast as soon as they were born. I ended up in a nursery, and my mom, there were some complications. My mom had some hemorrhaging and had to have transfusions and had IVs all over. And she said that it was probably a 24 or 48-hour period before she held me. And so I would have been in a bassinet somewhere, and nurses would have fed me when it was feeding time, but they also have other jobs to do. So as a 24 to 48-hour baby, there would have been a lot of hold me that didn't happen. So I guess I do want to point out that there are always, you know, there are often experiences that our biology and our physiology knows and carries that we don't have conscious memory of. And so that's where the start of some of these nervous system responses happen. So these patterns are running before the cognition comes in. So even though you can cognitively know that people have your back and they love you, it doesn't have a place to land because there's a response that has already started way before that.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
everyone's doing their best and trying to help and be positive and take care of each other, but like through no one's fault, it sometimes just doesn't end up being, well, I don't want to say it isn't enough because it sounds like there's never gonna be enough. I feel like there's always gonna be something that like, oh, this little butterfly effect thing, something's inched slightly to the left, and now it means I don't want to talk to people when I'm older. I don't know. But
Yeah,
yeah,
well, I think that's a valid point, and it's not about I think there are a lot of pieces in that. It's not about placing blame. You're right, everybody is trying to do their best. And also that's not about negating the experience that's actually happening. So
yes.
all of those things are true. So there's and you don't have to go digging for a story. Like
Mm.
don't have to, like, not everybody has access to their mom to ask about their birth story, or maybe there's just haziness around details, and like you don't have to go looking for what the cognitive story is. The story is lived inside your body. Like our cells are present for all of the experiences that we live, and so the story is within you. You just have to pay attention to what's, like, your body will tell you. Or if it doesn't specifically come through the body, it might come so when I, like in the bio, when you read that I identify as a deep feeler, for me emotions, like emotions kind of
Mm.
speak to me more than anatomy specifically. um but I can just pay attention to what emotion comes up, and then that, like, where this is going is also just the, when I acknowledge, biodynamics is all about the wisdom of the body. There's an understanding that there is a wisdom, and whether you think of it
Mm.
as existing within the body or just let it be within yourself, like however you want to connect to it, but there is a wisdom, and we don't have to override it or try to figure it out with our prefrontal cortex. We can let
Mm.
whatever's present right now in this moment be the first step, because that's what's showing up. So that's what's here. So that is the next step. That's what wisdom is showing you. Um, and so you can just be with that sensation or that feeling or emotion or whatever it is. And that's the part of the story that wants to be seen. So, it's less about those outside circumstances, because there's nothing about that that's ever going to change. And it's just more about what was the experience on my insides that didn't yet get witnessed or didn't yet get met or didn't yet get seen or heard, or like what's the resolution to that story? Like that's just a piece of the story, but there's more to the story, like that kind of feeling.
Yeah, and I think that like I definitely think that it kind of shows something like my tendency is to be more of like that on that like I look for like, oh, well, why is this happening and what's the explanation and what's yeah, what's this story and what does that mean on like an intellectual cognitive level and obviously I haven't done the learning for this, the biodynamic and et cetera, and I'd be much more in tune and uh not susceptible, but like more conducive to letting that stuff go and not worrying as much about, yeah, like, oh, what's this story? What's this narrative here? What does it mean? What does it say? Whatever, and just be like, hey, this is the reality, the felt lived experience, and let's be with that regardless of where it might come from or whatever, and just like have it be there and don't try to explain it or justify it or analyze it and all that stuff. So it's
Well, you're
funny that
speaking to, like, so yep, I'm the same. And what I've been learning and understanding about all of that is that we go to our place of comfort. Like, like our systems on our behalf have disconnected us from the things that are super uncomfortable. But also we just have patterns running of, like, it's just normal to move away from what's uncomfortable. And so if there's a sense that whatever you might be starting to touch into is going to get a little uncomfortable, you'll go to where you're comfortable. So in our case, because we're very similar in that way, um, it's a lot more fun and comfortable to like figure things out and go into the story and find the meaning. And it's just like there's little, even as I say that and talk like that, I'm like, there's little like dopamine hits in my brain. Like, I love that, making the connections and figuring it out. And oh, that's what that means. Like, it gives you this little, like, oh my gosh. Um, but each time you do that, you're leaving the part of you that has that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been a big part of my journey, is understanding that. So we talk about people pleasing as having a source of abandonment, like it's an abandonment wound that creates the pleasing, which is a nervous system trauma response called fawning. But then that's an attempt to not have people leave. So you kind of morph yourself into whatever version you need to be accepted by the person so they don't leave. So you're trying to prevent an abandonment wound that's already happened. And um, but then what happens is you're constantly abandoning yourself. So even in the
Mm-hmm.
healing process, unfortunately, what can happen is, even with the best of intentions to be with or stay with a feeling or a part, or however that works best for you to like make contact to stories that are being lived inside of you or that are still alive inside of you, um, is then we will still default. And so for you and I, we go into the story of it. And so every time we go back into this, the idea of what's happening and not stay with the sensation or the emotion, we're then leaving that part that has that feeling. So we're abandoning that part again. And but that's so it's just like an ongoing journey of noticing and then coming back, and then
Yeah.
notice again and come back and just keep coming back.
Like I feel
Um,
like yeah, like we're engaging right now in that kind of like speaking, explaining type place about how it's important to get past the speaking, explaining type place. And I guess that kind of segues into me asking about like this summit and stuff, specifically about like how does this event like factor into your work, your
hmm.
journey, all of your cranio training, all of that, like what gives? What's the deal?
How did that happen?
Yeah.
So basically, I had a certain kind of experience that I thought of as my biodynamic craniosacral therapy experience. So I had a certain experience for the 2 years that it took to take the training. And then I became certified, I became a practitioner. And then the experience of being a practitioner, where people show up for a session once a week or once every couple of weeks, and they're there for an hour and then they leave, was such a contrast experience. And so my experience through the training was, I had a cohort. We were all women. It was one of the first cohorts that went through the school that didn't have a token male practitioner or whatever. But it was all women. We're all like-minded, wanting to be of service to others, wanting to be in the healing industry, wanting to experience our own healing, going through the process. Um, and we knew we were traveling this journey together for 2 years. And we had certain touch points. So every 2 months, we were meeting in Calgary for 5 days in person at a time. And so I traveled this whole journey of 2 years of pretty intense growth and development personally, but with these women in sisterhood, and with this within this container of um, yeah, that there was structure, and there was, like I said, the certain touch points that you knew that you'd be coming back together. And even within the training, that there was certain different kinds of learning were happening, a lot of process was happening, a lot of sharing was happening. We shared a lot of our healing and our lives together in those 2 years. And that was a huge part of the healing for me. Like, I can't even explain it. Just that there were so many transformative experiences, and the fact that I was being held by these women, um, like when you talk about love being received, that's what I felt from the circle of women. Um, and completely different from the paradigm that I had been living, this very codependent sort of um, worldview, where I really did have this idea that my romantic partner in life was going to be my best friend and my all, like just really sourcing from that romantic relationship as my entire sense of safety and protection and being provided for and all of these things. And then suddenly I was in this group of women um, and it just, when you talk about people needing a village, like that's what it felt like. It felt like it was just a different, and I didn't even know it was something I knew or something. Sorry, I didn't know it was something that I needed or was missing from my life. Um, but now I'm like, people shouldn't be without this. Like it's so pivotal to, um, especially as a woman, to have a sense of yourself as a woman, um, where women are all uplifting each other and we are really supporting each other, but not, it felt more like we were supporting each other's wisdom, even. Like, yeah, there was just so much about that. And another piece that I will say is that probably at a different point of time in my life, um, having a lot of unresolved trauma still running in my system, I would not have been open to that level of community and sisterhood. There really is something about having a trauma response and the shutdown of our social engagement system as part of that freeze response that really uh, kind of interferes with our ability to receive connection. So all of those things kind of, this little dance that has to happen, that we need community to heal, but we need a certain level of healing before we can accept that level of community. Like it kind of, those piggyback onto each other. So there's certain things that have to process through your system before you can accept connection, but then you need connection to help some of those things process. Like you can't have one or the other without, like you have to have both, and it's a little dance.
It's like you're talking about like, that whole cliche of like it takes a village and
Mm.
so you've made your village. You have founded this village and you
Oh,
are the
but I didn't complete because the rest of the question was then how does that translate into why is now the summit coming together? And right. So it's because wanted, I just needed to create something that felt like it was bringing people together and bringing a community together and um, yeah, just learning and understanding and sharing and as a group and to start to create something new and different. So on the other side of the summit, at some point, hopefully in the very near future, I want to be creating like a way of sharing what I know and love, but in a bigger, broader container where I don't have a person just coming to me for one session that I see them for an hour and then potentially never see them again. But to have like a bigger, longer container, to have certain touch points, to have group dynamics, and to have just to have that fuller experience, and to access more people in a different way than what the one-on-one hands-on sessions provide in the way that other practitioners traditionally do it. I needed to create something a little bit different. So it's still in process of being birthed, but this is the first little piece of it, the summit.
lovely. But circling back to stuff you've said about, within the body and the craniosacral stuff and different elements changing, like once you've opened up to yourself and seeing all these other things in your life change as well. A specific aspect of that I'm really curious about is like health. How does all of that
Mm.
factor into biodynamic craniosacral therapy?
One of the huge paradigm shifts that I had in the training was that it really was an orientation to health. Like it's really about not pathologizing anything that's happening or anything that's expressing through the body. And so in all these conversations about people pleasing, then for me, it was really an understanding of, oh, but also in our behavior. Like, let's not pathologize our behavior. So it's not just what symptoms might be showing up in our physical body, but also those symptomatic behaviors that sometimes show up in our relations. And so what I mean about orienting to health. So what they taught us in the biodynamic craniosacral therapy world is that everything that is expressing through the body is an expression of health. And so anyone that's listened to any of the other interviews, and especially around some of the trauma responses and nervous system stuff, is that yes, anything that's showing up is actually your body responding to an event or circumstance that it perceived as overwhelming at the time. And um, and so if symptoms are showing up, whether behavioral or physical, like we call them symptoms because it's something that we don't like. We really, there's a part of us that wants it to go away. But things really shift when you understand that what's showing up is your body or your internal wisdom's way of protecting you. Um, and so it's really, there's such a drive of life force within you that just wants to live. And
Mm.
so it will do all kinds of things that would in other, contexts be considered self-harming almost in a way, because it will shut down certain things in order to allow the entire organism to continue to function, even though down the road it feels a lot more like dysfunction. But really,
Mhm.
um, it's in complete support of life of your entire system
Mhm.
um, and moving forward. And so it's such a beautiful thing. The life force energy that we have access to, the potency we call it in our cranial world, is it only has a couple different roles it can play, but it can't multitask. So if there's life force energy in you that is engaged in protection, that little pocket of life force energy isn't then available for its other roles, which are healing or growth and development. And so when we talk about the healing journey, there as there's resolution, so it's not about getting rid of anything. It feels like more of a resolving. So the protection gets to meet with a sense of having come through the overwhelming thing, or it gets to meet with a sense of safety. So then, oh, we are okay. We don't need to protect anymore. There's a resolution that happens, and then that life force energy that was involved in protection is now available for healing and growth and development. And I would even argue that if you had a system that had X amount of life force energy and never encountered anything overwhelming, it would continue with X amount of life force energy. If you have a system that started with X amount of life force energy and it encounters something that was perceived as overwhelming and then learns that it has come through that situation and then can move from surviving into thriving, that system ends up with X plus Y amount of life force energy. So it's not about trying to figure out how to live life without ever encountering any difficulties. It really is such a gift.
Mhm.
And for sure, it doesn't always feel like a gift. I get it. But there's just really something beautiful about all of that, that we have these, um, like our bodies are still a mystery to us in so many ways, and that we're somehow wired for living and experiencing life and overcoming all kinds of difficulties and obstacles and and then coming through it bigger, better, stronger, more resilient, more wise, more like with more gifts and more like just all of it. Like we come out thrive, yeah, exactly that, thriving instead of surviving. And so that's, yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is on the other side of that.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's such a valuable thing that, like, just in my personal life too, I find myself like whenever I'm able to come back to it and remember it, it's so like euphoric to remember like there's no part of you that is your enemy or your antagonist, even though like I'm used to being like, upset with the parts of myself that I'm like, why are you not perfect? Why is this causing suffering? Why is blah blah blah? But like recognizing that everything in me is just trying so much and caring for me and doing its best and like it's like, oh, these little parts of me. Oh my gosh. I wish you were a physical part outside of me so I could just give you a big hug. And it's just like so relieving to have it reframed in that way. And that in and of itself, I feel like is so to not be fighting against yourself and instead be like,
Yeah.
right, you are doing your best. You think you're helping, you're trying. It's like trying to like redirect a child who's like, okay, I see you're trying to do something here. Let's put this energy towards something a little bit more pro-social or something like that, you know?
Sure. Except also, I will counter that and say that maybe it's not about redirecting, but maybe it's about letting them express.
True.
Right. So that's the whole thing is like, let's create a safe space. Let's touch into that part. And then what does that part need to express? Because when they're allowed to, like when they have the space and the safety to actually fully express, that's what the resolution is.
True, true.
Right. So it's not imposing our own idea. Like if our own ideas worked,
Hmm.
we wouldn't like if we could just do that, if our ideas could just carry us, that that'd be great. But there's this part, whatever part you're speaking about, that you're like you're not not so happy with that part. If you have the ability to stay in curiosity with it and to just like make contact, but in a safe way and allow it to express and to um, orient to that that mindset that whatever it's doing is for you and that somehow it has its own wisdom and there's something here for you to learn um, from that part that you kind of wish would go away. Like it's a bit of a mind game. It can happen that way, sort of in kind of conversationally and kind of relating, if you can relate to it as a part. Um, but or it can happen through the body, through physical touch, through in-person session. There's different ways to do it, but it really is about that orientation that this part is doing something for me. And can I be curious about that? And can I let it express? And when it can fully express what it needs, that's when something releases. Yeah.
I love you. It's just like, especially like, I don't know, this is like off topic to your whole recording and things, but like I was having another experience with like friends lately, which I've told you I've kind of had these moments before where it's like just like talking about our various mothers as people who we ourselves are young adults now, and so that dynamic with parents has definitely shifted, and talking to friends who are like, you know, engaging with parents as child and parent, but also as people who are two adults and things, and just like, man, I'm glad my mom is my mom, you know? And just like the fact that, like, I mean, obviously you've done a lot of growing even as I've grown, but even when I was little, like, just growing up with you as someone who was like aware of emotional intelligence type concepts and things to do with one's well-being and looking into oneself and taking care of oneself in that regard is like, like I feel like I got a great jump start on a lot of things because of that awareness. And like even now, like I still just get we can just talk about these things and be like, yeah, and this is how I'm thinking of the thing. And you're like, well, think about it this way. And I'm like, oh my God, you're so right. I'm like, I get all your insights for free because I came out of you. It's a pretty sweet deal.
Great. And I might leave all of this in because as you're talking, I'm like, I for sure one of my sort of pain points, and it's come up in a couple interviews, is like, if I only had figured some of this out sooner, could I have helped, like you, for example, on your own journey, because you have your own fun times with being a people pleaser, perfectionist, and all these things, right? So there is that sort of that guilt. It's like, if I could have, if I could have, but also seeing it. There's also lots of conversation around attachment wounding, mother wounding, and so as a mother, to look back and kind of acknowledge, oh, I had trauma responses running in my system. I wasn't fully able to be present and attuned. It's like to just that feeling of I wish I could go back and do the mothering better, like do it over again, because if I could do it now as who I'm showing up as now, like, but also there's an understanding that because as you said, not everybody
Mhm.
has a certain kind of relationship with their own mother. And somehow that's completely okay. Like
Mhm.
somehow, um, again, it's just like whatever's showing up in your system, that you get to learn how to connect with and allow to express. It may be that your relationship with your mother might be that might be your lucky entry point into the stuff that bothers you that you start taking a
Mhm.
look at. Um, but it's not about blaming mothers. It's not about blaming parents. It's really every person has their own journey of um, it. Yeah, I feel like it really is a rite of passage. Somehow, some of us kind of come through life expecting that we would all be better if people around us treated us better. And but also maybe this is just part of being human, and we all get to enter and go through this stage of development where we learn that we have to be our own parent. Like, ugh, well, that sucks, but okay, I guess I'll figure that out next. But because it does take a lot. It is a lot. And it's yeah, I'm sure everybody knows what I mean when I say there's resistance to it. Like, yeah, I feel like it's just a part of growing as a human is to figure out that you gotta start being the person who has your own back. I know one of the other speakers said that in those words. I think it was Teresa Byrne. But that yeah, so there's a part of you that resists and be like, well, no, they should have done that for me. They should have been that person for me. But you get to be that person for you, and then be surprised at how many other people show up that you can rely on equally the same once you have that in you first.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, yeah, like it'd be ridiculous to pretend that you were the perfect parent because that's not something that exists, perfection being this constant mirage on the horizon that like the yeah, it takes so much away from you when you keep trying to pursue it instead of, hey, like look and set up where you are and actually like live in the real world in a kind of way instead of keep chasing this thing that won't ever happen. And yeah, like I want to say it was like a neuroscience course that I took in university at some point that, yeah, because we were learning a lot about like, yeah, like about child development and like ACEs being like adverse childhood experiences and about like just the capacity for children to go through a lot of stuff so long as they have a certain I guess, foundation of supportive, safe relationships. A lot of things that are stressful can be experienced by these children, but it's not going to be full on like toxic stress that leads to like, you know, trauma, however you define it. Like, we're resilient so long as we have like
Mhm.
some sort of resource of even just like one person in our lives who's like that supportive thing. And like yeah, like when I think of mom, I think of support, like the unconditional support, like I feel like it was good. You parent good. Seal of
I love
approval.
that. Okay. Well, also thank you because that, you know, on some level is not my perception, and particularly when you're like pre-verbal. So I'm glad that your post-verbal memories are like, oh, she's so great. But I'm like concerned about your pre-verbal memories. But anyways, that's a whole other topic.
You
But
know, against you for forever, don't worry.
all your therapy sessions are about me. I get it. But I do love what you're saying because that, like, even though I just finished saying you get to be the person that reparents you and you get to have your own back, but you're right, because you're dealing with all of these little parts within you that experienced adverse child experiences, that like it is important. We talked about community earlier, but even just having a connected guide or support person or therapist or like somebody else to work with that can provide a sense of that. Because a lot of times, as you're suggesting with your conversations with your friends, a lot of times it's not a family member. Um, so it is important to seek out a relationship where you do have that sense. And ideally, that's a part-time relationship that's only going to have to exist for a certain amount of time in that capacity until you get to become that within yourself. But to start with, like on the healing journey, you can only get so far sitting like I wish this were not true, but it is true. I would have loved to have been able to say that all the hours I spent sitting alone at home, reading books and watching videos and taking online courses was what did the trick. It was actually being in relationship, having a mentor, having a guide, having somebody I was working with. Um, that made all the difference. So it's that's an important piece. So I'm glad you brought that up because we are like little children if that's when our nervous system responses started, and that version of us still needs that supportive other to help us learn that we have the resources to move through those experiences without having that connection first. It's not enough input into the system to allow it to move out of those. Yeah.
Uh, so to finally wrap up, Cora Rennie, is there one specific thing you would want our audience to leave with here today? Any final words of wisdom for them?
Yeah. Um, it really is just the piece about um, so one of the pain points of being a people pleaser is feeling like you don't really know what you want and you don't really know yourself and you just don't know, you don't know, you don't know. Um, but there's a little part of you that well, there's a part that knows. It's probably not very little. Um, and that there's you get to trust that you'll know what your next step is. So the beautiful thing, as we talked about, is that there are all these speakers and presenters and experts that have been a part of the summit, and they all have their own magic of how they help people. And there's going to be something that, or more than one thing potentially, that really resonates and just really feels something that just feels closer to what matches for you, even if you can't explain why, even if it makes no sense, but you can trust
It's
that.
really,
So,
weird to have feelings for you as a mom and then also feelings for you as like another person, another woman like out in the world, but like both of those facets of Cora that I interact with, I love a lot and am proud of. And it's weird because I feel like I'm saying things that you've said to me while I was growing up and things too about being like, I'm so proud of seeing who you're becoming and all that stuff. And it's kind of silly to say that back to one's mom, but like it's true, and I like you. I love you and I like you, which is a really winning combination.
that is the really winning combination. Thank you for interviewing me for this
Mhm.
summit, Megan.
Thank you for letting me interview you, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.